So good afternoon and welcome to today's Michigan Alliance for Families webinar. Our topic today is person-centered planning, and we have with us Dr. Sally Burton-Hoyle.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and talk with you about a topic that is dear to my heart. I have been doing person-centered planning for way too many years, and I began doing it because I wanted there to be a different way to look at people and their future. I began doing this because the school district had me come in and observe somebody with very, very severe challenges. And I think they just kind of wanted like a psychological assessment, but it was really about who the person was and what their life was. And so person-centered planning is about a person's life. Okay. How we're going to start today is a quiz, and we're going to then talk about what person-centered planning is and the values and principles behind person-centered planning, what may be included in a person-centered plan, a review, and final thoughts about that. And I guess I want to start with something that I know you as participants, as you listen to these questions, hopefully we'll get the answers, and I might jump in and answer them kind of as we're talking about them. But at the end, we'll do this quiz again. Who's always in attendance at the person-centered plan? And I'm going to hope and put this little seed right now with all of you that who's always in attendance is the person we're doing the plan for. What is the purpose of a person-centered plan, and when do you do a person-centered plan? What are the circumstances? When are the requirements? Such and such. What are typical topics at a person-centered plan? So what are the things that you might come around doing for a person-centered plan? Do you have to do any prior planning for a person-centered plan? Should you just get a notice in the mail like you do for IEPs that says person-centered plan is coming up? Do you have to do a person-centered plan for everyone that's eligible? And when I say eligible, I would be speaking specifically about individuals under the mental health code of the Department of Community Health. Okay, so those are some things to think about. I kind of gave away my first answer because I want to make sure you know and understand that, because that is something that is an issue many, many, many places in the state, regardless of what is written in the mental health code. And we're going to start with, why would the person always be at the person-centered plan? Well, if it is your life, the number one value and principle of person-centered planning is that we look at strengths and however that person expresses preferences to make choices. Do you have to be verbal to do a person-centered plan? No, absolutely, because you understand your loved one or whoever it is you're supporting, and they don't need to talk for you to understand what their choices are. And you might hear somebody say that, well, we really can't do a person-centered plan because they're not verbal. That is absolutely not true. We look at that person and we observe and see how is it that they do express their preferences and how do they make choices. The individual's choices and preference shall always be honored and considered, if not always granted. And that is, those are words directly from the mental health code, and that in a person-centered plan, a person might talk about or their behavior might communicate, and the loved one might talk about what sorts of things they might be interested in. And it is the job of the community mental health agency to always consider those sorts of things. And all things might not be possible, but I think that I'm going to give a quick example. In a person-centered plan, once an individual, when I said, what would be things you might like to do? And he said, well, I would like to have my own boat. And everybody kind of rolled their eyes and thought what an unrealistic sort of thing that was. But upon questioning and asking him, wow, that sounds fun. Have you been on a boat very many times? He said, no. And I said, what would you do on a boat if you were on there? He said, I'd fish. and he had I forgot, a bluegill or some kind of fish he knew that he wanted to get. And I said, so you'd want to go on a boat and you'd want to fish for bluegill. And I said, have you ever done that? He said, no. And I asked him again, I said, so have you ever been, what kind of boat have you been on? He said, I've never been on a boat. So if you question the individual respectfully, you can find out that, no, he probably doesn't want a boat, but he does indeed want an opportunity to fish for things. And we call that reframing. And reframing through respectful questioning is something that that must be done. Presuming competence, as we'll talk about, kind of being a cornerstone of person-centered planning, is that we look at the individual as a competent individual, no matter who they are, and whatever sorts of measurements have been given that have been said to you about yourself or your loved one. The next value that is critical to a correctly and successfully done person-centered plan is the recognition that every individual has gifts and contributions. Every single person has a way that they can help. I know families who they go as a family and there's a blight, a cleanup sort of day in Detroit, and I know a family and their son participates because their family value is that people should contribute to the community. And all too often, students through the special education process, so many things are done for them, and we kind of forget about that. And again, as we think about your next seminar is going to be on self-determination. How do you get people ready for self-determination is by many of the same sorts of things today, and by doing honoring a person's choice and looking at how are ways that they can contribute to the community. And also that each individual has the ability to choose how support services and treatments may help them utilize their gifts and make contributions to community life. In the individual across the spectrum, there are some individuals that might say exactly what they want as far as support and services. They might say, I want somebody to teach me how to ride the bus, or I want somebody to go to pick me up in the car. And we have to look at how a person has communicated through their behavior, what sorts of things would make sense from those who honor and respect them. Services and treatments, there are some individuals, especially as we get into adulthood, and just because they're not verbal, they may not want service or treatment. And so we've got to look at how they have communicated through their behavior, what sorts of services would ultimately help them realize what it is that they would want to do. If a person's goal is to live in the community and what they love to do is cook their own meals, then it makes sense to see how it is we can help them learn how to cook better. So it's all relative, it's all specific to the individual. And it's all based on what sorts of things they are interested in. It's based on strengths and needs. And obviously, if something like Medicaid, it has to be based on what a need is. But we don't focus on that as much as we do what their strengths and what their interests might be. Because if someone needs to learn how to manage their behavior, and we say, all right, the focus of your life is going to be managing your behavior. Or if a person doesn't typically intuitively get up and shower and brush their teeth and put on deodorant, and we say the focus of your life is going to be keeping yourself clean, well, how many of us would want to live that life? And I'm going to answer, none of us. We get up, we get cleaned up so that we can go somewhere, but the focus of my life is certainly not being med compliant or brushing my teeth. I do those things so that ultimately my day and life in the community makes sense. The person-centered planning process should maximize independence. We should look at that individual and think, how can they be more independent? And again, looking at what supports they want to have. Do they want somebody verbally telling them what to do minute by minute, or are they quite annoyed by that, and would they rather have a list or a picture schedule or something like that? In looking at the possibilities is the wonderful fun part of a person-centered plan, not a scary part, but let's step back and think, how can we right now begin planning for this person to have as much as independence as makes sense for that person. And I want you to really think about it, because some people would want financial independence and they would want to plan their budget. Other people don't care about that, but they would care about, for instance, that their transportation needs being met and their ability to go out and play hockey with a group of kids, or to go to the community for church if that's something that's important to them. A person's cultural background must be recognized, in that each person's culture should dominate what and how things are done around them. We do not violate a person's culture by saying they must do this, they must do that, they must eat this kind of food, because all things are important and all things should be considered when we are supporting an individual. It's not going to work if I tell you, based on your culture, that you're wrong to eat the foods that you want to eat, or you're wrong to worship in the way that you typically worship. It's a process in which we are providing the opportunities for people to reconvene any or all of the planning processes. So if we've got, and I just finished a person-centered plan that went, we had a pre-plan, and then we met on two occasions, each for about 2 hours, I don't recommend that you ever sit longer than an individual is comfortable doing, but because this is a process, it may take longer. Many of them we are done with a pre-plan and a session. But the idea that, and it's similar kind of to an IEP, you may call an IEP whenever you want. If things are not working out, then you reconvene your person-centered planning process. Think about if you've never had the opportunity to make choices, if you've never had the opportunity to, with support, go grocery shopping and cook your own food, well, or you've got a roommate for the first time in your life. There may be some glitches there that need to be worked out, and some things, just as all of us have done in life, all of us have changed majors in college, we've changed how it is we do things. That is also allowable and certainly encouraged in this. We want to always, Medicaid and funding through that is the measure of last support, and so we always want to say what are the natural supports that could be possible for an individual, family, friends, and allies, but we don't want to tax families in that, and I strongly encourage families want the opportunity to be just parents to an individual, especially as an individual. If you've got a 25-year-old, you are going to be very, very happy to let other people step in, and it's advised that we work towards community involvement, towards being a part in the community. And I want to say something here too, and then community is defined by the individual. Community is not defined by the Community Mental Health Agency. Community is not defined by me. It's not defined by you as the parent. Community is defined by that person and what it is they want to do. I'm going to give an example. When my brother, when I moved him here, and he'd been in a group home and institutions and had never had the opportunity to make choices, and here we moved him to Ann Arbor, right as the art fair, the famous Ann Arbor Art Fair, was happening. And so his staff was so enthusiastic about his community involvement that they said, we're going to take Tim to the art fair. Well, Tim does not like heat. He does not like being in crowds, and he didn't want any part of that. And so I advised them. I said, well, you can try, because as families we have to be careful not to say, no, never do that. But as they drove around, he quickly became anxious in seeing the throngs of people, and so they decided, yeah, maybe that is it. But guess what he did love to do? He loved to look in car lots. And so community, as defined by my brother, was going to different car lots and looking at cars and looking at the sticker prices of things and all those sorts of things. So just as an example, what is it that your child or you yourself like to do? That is how you define community. and that people are there, and again using their behavior as communication, if not their direct verbal language, so that they are assisting with what their ultimate goals and desires and are indicated on the plan of service. And the development of natural supports is an equal responsibility of the community mental health and the individual. So, we say that because this is in the Mental Health Code and in the Department of Community Health Essential Elements of PCP, which is you can find if you Google this. So let's say that you have a child who's been in a self-contained setting their entire life, and they don't have any natural supports other than you as the family. That's kind of a terrible task, and you would feel frustrated and think, how in the world do I do that? Well, you would ask for help with that, and that may be some of the goals that you would have, that you would want to work on, with your child, is that how can we get some community connections? And that is a possible. It isn't just like you have community connections or you don't. Well, sometimes people have to learn how to have community connections. And I can say that through doing this sort of thing, and it's a daunting task. I had my brother here, and he didn't, we don't have any family around. So to say we've got to have natural supports, those have to be developed. Now, what worked with him was to have a very good schedule. If he had a schedule where he went to many of the same places in the community throughout the week, guess what happened after a couple weeks, after a couple months? People got to know who he was. So it's a process, but you need to learn what that process is. And you just can't say, oh, they don't have any, we can't do this. It's a process. And that's why kind of all parts of the person-centered planning process. And you have to think of it that way. It's not going to happen in a day. A very important piece that I'm so happy to share with everybody listening to this is that you have the opportunity to have an independent facilitation of the person-centered planning meeting. If you have, you go to your local community health agency and you're eligible, then they say, well, we need to do a person-centered plan, and I'll do it. Well, you need to ask about who can do it independently of them, because it's considered a conflict of interest if somebody representing the agency is then facilitating the person-centered plan. So make sure you ask who else can do my child's person-centered plan, or your child might ask who else can do this besides this lady sitting right here. And as I'm talking about this too, I want you to think that they're in the mental health system. There's two sides. There's the developmental disability sides, and there's the mental illness side. And guess what? You are, a person-centered plan is a requirement throughout whatever side of the mental health system that you are on. And what it says here too is that if you're receiving short-term therapy only, medication only, and I think respite services only, they don't have to do a person-centered plan. But for all other people, if you are getting SSI and you are a CMH consumer, then a customer, then you should have a person-centered plan. Now, this is one of the questions I asked, like, well, do you have to do anything before the meeting happens? Well, a pre-planning meeting should occur. In a pre-planning meeting, we choose who we want to be involved with. And just as any good thing in your life, you plan for it, right? So if somebody calls you or you get something in the mail saying your person-centered planning meeting is going to be this week or whatever, you need to kind of put the brakes on that in whatever way and say, well, we got to do a pre-plan first. And in the pre-planning, we would talk about who we would want there and what we would want to focus on. I'll kind of talk about more of that later. The person-centered plan is what is done, as you look at C there, to develop an individual plan of service. An IPOS, an individual plan of service, is what is going to have as it says here, the scope, duration, intensity, and it includes your budget for services. So that IPOS, individual plan of service, should never, ever be done without a person-centered plan having been done. So think about that, any of you listening to this, that a person-centered plan is critical, not only to seeing exactly what it is the person, your child, or what is important to you all, but in the mental health code it says that it must occur before the IPOS. In the person-centered plan, we find out what needs, desires, and preferences are, and how do we do that with some folks? Well, we need to make sure there's accommodations for communications with choices and options clearly explained. If an individual has visual impairment, cognitive impairment, hearing issues, even more important. I did a person-centered plan pre-plan once with an individual, and what we did was we walked up and down the hallway of their school. And that person indicated by looking at a person and walking up to a person and smiling that that was a person that they wanted to have at the meeting. And that is a key part of the person-centered plan. It is who is desired and required. Who is desired and required at the person-centered planning meeting? And it's not up to you, mom and dad, but who are those people that respect and honor the individual? That's what's important. You cannot make that decision just based on, well, I don't care what they say, I'm going to have this person there. And I'm going to give an example of that. Somebody with diabetes, and they have some health impairments, but guess what? The only health person that they've ever worked with at the community mental health is a nurse that they did not like at all. They did not want that person there. And the mom said, well, I don't care that the person is coming, and we had kind of a giant meltdown with the individual. So remembering that the person-centered plan is not a parent-centered plan, but it is a person-centered plan based on what that individual would, desires or requires. And I should point out at this point, too, that under age 14, it's a family-centered plan. After age 14, it is a person-centered plan, and which would make sense, right? When somebody's 14 or under, the family plays more of a role. As a person goes towards adulthood, 18 and over, consideration, of course, of who are those family friends that, and I'm not saying family friends aren't a part of it, but the focus needs to be on the person so that they can have the people around to help them make choices and decisions. And this is particularly critical for individuals who have limited life experiences in the community. So if you have been in a self-contained, segregated environment, and we're saying, oh, we're going to have you live in the community and work with support, and you must have those people that know you and respect you. And those people that would understand how you operate. And I'm saying you, meaning if you are that focus person of the person-centered plan, the focus person being the person we're doing the plan for. Okay? Individuals are provided with ongoing opportunities to provide feedback, and that usually is done within the person-centered planning process, where we might say at the end of the person-centered plan, okay, well, let's see, how are we going to communicate? Should I call you? Let's say I'm the support coordinator or case manager. Should I call you once a month? Do we want to have a once-a-month meeting so we can see how things are going? A plan, in other words, a setup of how it is. We're going to figure out how that person is doing, and regardless of if they are verbal or not. There are some individuals that, that are tech savvy, and they say, let's email once a month, or I will call you as soon as I'm not happy with things. So it all depends on the individual. I'm trying to give some worst case scenarios in case you have, you are working with or you have a child that would not be able to independently say, hey, things are not going well. Now, once we've done the pre-plan, we've done the person-centered plan, a person should receive their individual plan of service, IPOS, within 15 business days after their meeting. That's kind of an important fact, and one in which you might need to monitor, because every time I say this, everybody always says, well, they didn't know anybody that had gotten one within 15 days, but you need to say that, and you need to expect that you would get that. So as we're talking about kind of stop here and let's look at what are the planning components. Well, we have to remember that people with disabilities are more normal than not, and that as people are advancing in age, we need to look at things that people their age in the community normally do. And if you have no idea, we think, where in the world do we start with this person? They're not verbal. They don't indicate things that that they might be interested in. Start with, well, what would somebody else in that age bracket do? And then you can figure out quickly what are those things that make sense. And then the other part is person-centered planning is about relationships, not professionals. Okay, so I might want you to come to my plan because I like you, because you've always been respectful to me, or you might recommend that for your child because the individual's always treated you and the family respectfully. But it's not about, you don't invite somebody, like you get an IEP, memo, a notice, and you would see OT, speech and language, all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm going to go back to something the Mental Health Code says. It's that people that are desired or required are invited to the person-centered plan. You, and especially the person that the plan is being done for, make that final determination. Who's coming, desired or required? Now, you've got to have, and when I say that, there are families that might say, let's say their kid is still in school. They might say, well, I do not want anybody from the school coming. And I'll say, well, what's your focus on in the meeting? Well, we want to talk about summer plans, right? Are you interested at all in any kind of summer programming? Yes, we have to have that. Okay, then I think that it would be required that you have somebody from the school there. Just as you're working in a mental health agency, you must have somebody from there. And if you don't like who your case manager is or support coordinator, then you get a supervisor. You get someone there with the ability to make some, to promise further sorts of work within that agency. So don't, it's about relationships, but you need to think about how is it you can bring people in. And how I've done it in the past is when somebody didn't like their support coordinator, well, we've had the supervisor come, and with one of the things of being, well, we've got to get a different support coordinator. Same thing with school is that we might say, if it deems appropriate that the special ed director is going to come, then let's say that they should come between 10 and 10:15. Now, I mean, you can limit the amount of time they're there. Now, I think it's best if they're there the whole time just so they can hear all the different aspects of the person's life. Because remember, IEPs are not about the person's life. A functional behavioral assessment is not about the person's life. The person-centered plan is about how we can make the best life possible and what are all the components, and they're not none of be necessarily anything like an IEP. If a person is 25 and you as a parent think, well, they must communicate better, but the individual, the focus person has not done well with speech and language therapy, then let's think about communication in a different way. Okay, we want to have that their communication, is more accessible, but if that communication is their behavior, then we need to make sure staff and other people can help make that person's the best life possible by interpreting what their behavior as communication is. Because there are going to be some individuals that you can't just say, oh, they're going to talk, because they may not. We have to look at what are all the components, and communication is a part of having your best life possible, but maybe it isn't talking, and some people can use assistive technology, some can't. Why do we do a person-centered plan? Well, it is a mental health requirement. Number one, if you are in the mental health system as a consumer with a mental illness or developmental disabilities, then it is a requirement. Upon eligibility, within 30 days, a person-centered plan should be done. At 15 days after that, an individual plan of service, and that's upon eligibility. So the length of time for the eligibility, that's going to vary. Now, another reason is that is best practice for anyone who challenges the system. I've done person-centered plans for individuals not in the mental health system at all, because it's a way to look at what their life, how we could help make their life better. It's some of the same reasons, only it may not be a requirement. If somebody's in school and they're not in the mental health system, but their life, could certainly use some improvement, then we might do a person-centered plan. And also, when we have difficult persons, regardless of the age, to look at their life, and look at what are some of the things that make sense. And many times, kind of my forte is working with those individuals with severe and challenging behaviors. One quick anecdote about a person we did a person-centered plan for. And he was still in school, but he was in the mental health system. He was living in an apartment with staff, and they were working on him being able to get a job at some point. And so they knew that a place he liked, and that was a particular state library. And he loved it there, but I think what he loved the most was that they would go to the cafeteria before they would go into like the work setting. And so everybody around him thought he wants to work in the cafeteria. But when he went in the cafeteria, there were a lot of challenging behaviors, and they would have to restrain him and take him out and all kinds of things like that, take him out of the cafeteria. So I said, why are you going to the cafeteria? Well, because that's where he wants to get a job. And I said, well, how often can you go eat at the cafeteria? Oh, we can't really do that. He can't really afford it. But what the individual was doing when he went in there was getting behind the food line and trying to take food out of the trays, which we know that's not okay. But I said to them, well, how often could he eat in the cafeteria? Well, he could eat once a month. I said, then go once a month to eat in the cafeteria. Don't go every day, because would you, if I said, hey, let's all go to Applebee's and bring your lunch, that wouldn't make sense, would it? So many times when we're trying to support difficult people, it doesn't make sense what it is we're trying to do. If we're, and I think many of you can figure out examples with yourself or your own children of the things that did not make sense, and you think, why on earth are they doing it? And then, of course, there were, behavioral issues. So person-centered planning is a process focused on and directed by the individual. That means the person that we're doing the plan for, things need to work around them. The people, the place, the location where we do the person-centered plan needs to be that which would work for the individual. So if we've got somebody highly distracted, and they, bells and different sorts of things bother them and a lot of conversation, then we wouldn't go to the school cafeteria to do this. Or we wouldn't necessarily be in a classroom after school, because there's always lots of distraction with that. If they like to be, for instance, at the community room at the mall, then maybe we would all meet there, because that's where the person would like it. So we do things that make sense for the individual. And then once we're there with the individual and we're meeting the individual's needs, then we help determine their outcomes with the folks that are invited, that have been invited, not mandated, but invited. And we then figure out what kind of supports and services they might need so that they would get their desired outcome. Some of the things we might talk about are where somebody might live. And so that is particularly for people entering adulthood and moving out of the home. How to spend time each day is any age, and I don't care whether you are 13 or you are 58 or 70 or whatever. How are you going to spend time each day? You go back to that what makes sense, and I did a person-centered plan for an individual that his day, every day from 9 to 11, he and the group that they had him with would sit in front of a fish tank and watch the fish. And I said, well, why do they do that? And they said, well, because it's really relaxing. Well, except the individual we were doing the person-centered plan for would run out of the room, and and they called him an elopement challenge, because he was always running away. So okay, he was supposed to sit and watch a fish tank for 2 hours, but he didn't like that. So did that make sense? No. So we should figure out better things, how it is he's going to spend his time. Who is he going to spend time with? So roommate issues, work partners, all of those sorts of things are critical for the success. Supports for their health and safety is something, of course. Health and safety is the bottom line for school. Health and safety is the bottom line for the mental health system. How is it we can support an individual's health and safety is to honor what their hopes and dreams are for the future, where they want to spend their time, and where they'd like to be. Because if we say, well, for this person's health and safety, they need to have 24/7 supervision and live with 5 people, but then the person is then running away, we're not supporting their health and safety. So we really have to balance this, and that's what the kind of the focus of the person-centered plan is. And I love this picture because one time an individual that I was doing a person-centered plan with said, this is like a party with a purpose. And definitely is a party with a purpose. This was a person-centered plan that I facilitated, and who's in the group is some staff, the family's there, the case manager's there, and family friends are there. So who's there is what will make the difference in the success of the person-centered plan. If you have a person-centered plan that goes horribly wrong, look at your pre-plan and think, who did we want to come? Who did somebody say, well, they need to come regardless? Well, that person might show up, and then there were difficulties. Again, cornerstones of the person-centered planning process, we must presume competence. We must look at that individual. We must talk to that individual as if they were going to respond. And then guess what? In the pre-plan, we might figure out if someone is nonverbal. I'm still going to ask him or her the questions, but it might be that we've identified in the pre-plan who their focus person is. Who do they trust to answer for them? And then we, of course, then look at the behavior to make sure, well, yeah, that makes sense. So I might look directly at your son or daughter and ask them a question, but you might be the one to respond. And those other people that are favored invitees would be honored to respond for that person. We've always got to look at the behavior as communication. That's kind of there as a check and balance. I've done plans where people say, well, I know that individual wants to continue going to the workshop. I know they want to continue going to the workshop. When we're planning how they spend their day, that's where they want to be. And then there might be somebody else that says, but maybe it's a parent that says, but they are constantly being sent home. So if the person is always running away, if they are leaving the premises, that's telling you something, isn't it? So maybe that person does not want to be at that location. So we need to look at how it is they behave as well as the individual's firsthand comments. So again, it's going to be any way that person communicates themselves, through their behavior, through other people who reflect on what their behavior probably is communicating. Again, we need to respect the cultural diversity in the person and where we do the plan and how it is we honor them and who's there. And again, bottom line, it's critical supports across the lifespan, so people may live where and with whom they want. Money is to follow the individual. It's not, just like in an IEP, we're not supposed to say, well, I can see that she's pretty impaired and she needs to go to such and such segregated school. Same thing applies in a person-centered plan. We need to think about where would that person be successful and where would that person be happy and what makes sense for that individual. So if you have a non-traditional communicator, and that would be a person who uses their behavior, we need to remember that reframing behavior as communication is the first step in understanding the person. And there also could be people who use augmentative devices, who use communication devices through their iPad. Whatever way that person communicates, that's what is used. Okay? So the outcomes of the process should drive the plan. So when we do a person-centered plan and we have found out what they currently do on a daily basis, how we could improve that, what they like, what the barriers might be, for different kinds of things that they do. You know, what their strengths are, what services and supports they need. That's what should be the guts of the person-centered plan. Should be easily seen when you get that individual plan of service. So let's say you do that person-centered plan and you come up with lots of things about where they would be happiest living and who they would want to live with and what the focus of their day should be and specific strategies and scripts about how that person can calm themselves down and different kinds of things like that. That you should look at that individual plan of service and see those things. It shouldn't be we do a person-centered plan. So you have to kind of be careful about this because I have to say that I've been in person-centered plans where maybe they've already done the IPOS, individual plan of service. That's just as wrong as if you went into an IEP and an IEP is already done. So the outcomes for the individual, which would take the form of goals, perhaps, different languages used across some of the different CMHs, but the goals or outcomes should be based on real life. The focus should be on community involvement and their personal happiness, you know, if they want to make friends, if they want to be involved in clubs or groups, how often they want to see their families. You know, with my brother, it was very important to him that he saw me on a regular basis. So we had a set thing, and so every Sunday night at 6 o'clock, I would pick him up and he would come to my home. But when that dinner time was over, he was anxious to get back to his own life. That's how you know things are going well, when people want to go back to their own life. It's always good to have somebody at the plan that really knows the community well, that they know about. And so when I go back to, this is not about professionals, this is about relationships. You know, for who do you know that knows every kind of activity that's offered through churches and the Ys and free activities and things at the library, all those sorts of things. That's real important to have those kinds of things. One particular person-centered plan I did that is just, it was a long, long time ago, but it was a woman with severe and persistent mental illness. And she wouldn't even let us come in her apartment. And finally, after a couple of different tries, I asked her, I said, what would you like to do in your life? And she opened the door crack and said, I want to do ballroom dancing, and then she slammed the door. And so to the team, I said, all right, guess what? That's what we're going to work on. Within the idea of ballroom dancing become many, many sub-skills, if you think about it. In order to do ballroom dancing, you probably are going to take a shower. You're probably going to maybe learn to dance. You're probably going to learn to have some kind of communication with other people. And it was a very, very, very slow process in that one of the issues was she wasn't allowing anybody in to her apartment. But using I want to do ballroom dancing as the ultimate thing that she wanted to do is what kept us on target. So then people, you know, and within our team saying, well, they know that this particular place at the senior center offers ballroom dancing, and if the person didn't mind, you know, going up 10, 20 years, they could go and get those kinds of things for free. So again, knowing what the opportunities are for within the community. Outcomes are the reason that you get up in the morning. Okay, outcomes are not that you brush your teeth. Outcomes are not that you use deodorant. Outcomes are not that you manage your behavior. Outcomes are the things that you enjoy doing. All right, so something that you need to think about. These are some of the questions that you would in a pre-plan do. So remember, prior to person-centered plan happening, we're going to figure out where should the plan take place, and again, based on the comfort level of the individual. What should we discuss? What topics should not be discussed? A person-centered plan is not an open book to talk about every horrible thing that that individual has done. And I remember one time we were doing this and an individual whispered in my ear, please don't let them talk about when I pulled my pants down at the mall. And I said, okay, we won't talk about that. So that doesn't mean you don't talk about them later, and it doesn't mean that something isn't an issue. But at that person's person-centered plan, we honor what it is that they do, want to talk about, want to not, and what you don't want to talk about. Who should we invite? Who should not be included? I say that because there are many, many times, the majority of times, everybody's good. You know, I don't care, fine, this person could come. But they may not want their foster parent there. They may not want, you know, a teacher there. They may not want their nurse there. Anybody that the person would want should be included. Then you got to figure out who's going to invite guests, who, when should we have it. I always ask too, how am I going to know if you're happy with what's being said? So we get a sign or a gesture, and maybe the person, maybe if they begin rocking a lot or getting up and pacing, or their face, one young man just recently I did that, he would kind of get some tics. And that would be, okay, let's stop talking immediately about whatever that topic is. And then who do you want to take notes, and any other kinds of things. In the person-centered plan, people introduce themselves based on their relationship. Hi, I'm Sally. I've known Tim for 20 years. So it's that sort of thing. Then we talk about what is the history of the individual based on that person, okay? I don't want a social developmental history. What matters to the person? And that is as individual as everybody listening to this. You might want to talk about that with your own life, that, my gosh, nobody ever had a birthday party for me. So we talk about those things according to that person and their family, of things they want others to know about them, so that, and many times we did this, I did this, and one young girl said, you know, she wasn't saying it, and her mom said, you know, I think I need to say something here, and that is that in a community-based activity at school, she was being, they were working on the goal for using the bathroom independently, and while at the mall, she got molested. Okay, yes, we do need to know that. Everybody around the room just looked like, oh my gosh, because guess what they'd been working on? They'd been trying to get her to use the bathroom independently, and she didn't want to do it. So guess what? Change that right now and support that person and make that person's anxiety go away by having somebody go with them and not work on what you're working on. So it needs to be, again, according to the person. Get people talking about what has surprised you about the individual. I think is so important, so that we can hear all the good things. This should be, like I said, a party with a purpose. It should be joyful. It should be self-esteem raising. As we talk about, you know, what are choices the person would make or not make, and what are the things that have made sense in my life, and what are the things that haven't made sense. We always talk a lot about what their current schedule is and barriers to the schedule and ideal daily schedules. What are my strengths? What are my interests? And don't get thrown by the word strengths. Strengths is a loaded word, because if you have a child, as I had a brother, that nobody ever talked about things in terms of his strengths. What is he interested in? Because if you're told your child has no strengths, or that their IQ is this or that, you know, kind of dig down and think, well, what are they interested in? And whatever word makes sense to you. And again, barriers. Are there barriers that deter people from seeing what I'm interested in or what my strengths are? How could we improve my daily schedule so that I could be included more in what I like? What are activities in the community? And then we develop outcomes. And outcomes, again, might be that you know, I'm gonna learn what's in the community. I am going to use the parks in the city. I'm going to be involved in recreation with swimming, because I love that. I want to see what my skills are so that I can get a job. You know, on and on. Again, but again, these are not. Any of the things I'm saying are not medication compliance or losing weight or any of those sorts of things. So, you know, we talk about. Then I always ask families, you know, what they think about this process, and kind of their final thoughts on that. So now, kind of getting to I hope we'll quickly answer these things as our time is growing tight. Who's always in attendance at the person-centered plan? I hope you've answered the person who we're doing the plan for. Always, always, always. And it could be that that person comes in and out of the room. It could be that they're playing nearby and within earshot. I've done person-centered plans where the individual paces around the table the entire time. I've had people that attend part and then need a break and they go on a walk and they come back in, or staff takes them out. It's according to them, but they are always within earshot, and as soon as they've had enough, then we do stop. And sometimes that's not according to, that may not be a popular thing, but as soon as you see somebody that they're done, and you know that with individuals that they're done for the day, then we reschedule, because it is a process, not an event. Again, the purpose of a person-centered plan, when do you do it? Well, two situations. One is if you are in the mental health system, well, upon eligibility, person-centered plan is done before the IPOS is completed. And you also might do it if you don't know what else to do. You've got somebody with very challenging behaviors, and you know, we're wanting to look at their life. Typical topics of a person-centered plan are what is important to you guys and to the individual. If we're you know, approaching transition time, it's going to be work and activities in the community, and you know, a place to live, and finding a roommate, and those are typical kinds of things. Do you have to do prior planning for a person-centered plan? Yes. You will ask for a pre-plan. And you will not take anything less, because there are sometimes when people say things like, oh, no, we know him so well, we don't really need to do one. Yes, you do, because if you're going to have a successful person-centered plan, you will do a pre-plan for it. Do you have to do a person-centered plan for everyone eligible in the mental health system? Yes. And there were a couple of conditions there. That was if you just are from getting medication only, if you're in there for short-term therapy or respite, you don't need one. But everybody else, if you are a client of the community mental health system, make sure you look at the Michigan's Mental Health Code. And if you go to Michigan Department of Community Health, you can look at person-centered planning. You can look at what it says in code about that, and other pieces of information about the plan of service. So at that point, I guess that my final thoughts are that you do a person-centered plan. It should give everybody information in order to better support the individual. That's the bottom line, is that we would learn about the person so that he could have a good life. The language used, the length of time is dictated based on the individual's need. They are mandated for each consumer, as I just said. Person-centered plans should be enjoyable and self-esteem raising experiences. They should be that it brings everybody together. It brings all the same issues so that everybody can work on them collectively as a group in support of the individual. And ending with something that one of the people I did a plan with said that I want you to remember, and that it should be like a party with a purpose. So at that point, I'm going to end now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Sally. This webinar is presented by Michigan Alliance for Families. You can contact us with any follow-up questions at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org, or you can call us at 1-800-552-4821.